So without further ado, we'll get started tonight. A brilliant subject, really great content about the welfare and performance of the ridden horse. And Anne's also going to touch on saddle suitability, comfort, fit and function. So really, really good learning process tonight. So I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting questions coming through, and there's lots of good videos to show. So I'll disappear. We'll let you talk, Anne, and then I'll see you at the Q&A session at the end.
Thank you, Thea. Yes, see you shortly. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, everybody. And I'd like to thank Horse Tribe for the opportunity to share my work with you. I'm an independent equine performance consultant with a particular interest in poor performance, and I work with horses and riders to help resolve problems and optimize performance. My topic today is the future of welfare and performance of the ridden horse. Today, the popularity of equestrian sport continues to increase along with the corresponding rise in the level of competitiveness. This demand creates a vast range of problems in relation to ensuring the fitness of horses to compete. Equestrian sports are receiving increasing criticism from the public because of concerns about equine welfare. Welfare issues associated with equestrian sports include the use of potentially harmful equipment, the application of coercive training techniques, orthopedic problems, and a general increased risk for traumatic injuries in competition horses. Problems which have been identified in leisure horses include obesity, gait abnormalities or lameness, aversive riding aids, lack of regular saddle fit checks, and a high prevalence of owner-reported behaviour problems. In this presentation, I'll discuss some of these problems and how they affect the future of welfare and performance of the ridden horse. I'll unpick some aspects of the horse-saddle-rider interaction and consider how, as horse owners, we can be fit for purpose in today's fast-changing world. The role of the horse has changed from a source of food, work, and transport Sorry, but my computer has decided to stick. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. To one as a partner in sport and recreation. He's changed from a cash earner into a cash drainer. This changing role, inextricably linked to the needs of man, has dictated the way that the horse has been managed and trained to effectively exploit the horse's usefulness. The equipment we use in our use of the horse has also evolved. One such use of the horse was in fox hunting, which originated in England in the 16th century. In Germany, after the Second World War, fox hunting was banned. In February 2005, fox hunting was banned in England. Because of its long tradition, many people had believed that this iconic sport was ingrained in British culture and would be part of our heritage forever. However, the anti-hunting movement influenced public opinion to the point where previously indifferent people began to see images or hear reports that were so distasteful to them that they took the side of supporting an outright ban. The hunting community had lost the confidence of the public to behave legitimately, with accountability and in a socially and environmentally responsible way. They had lost their social license to operate. So what is a social license to operate? Put simply, it's the public acceptance of an organisation to undertake its activity. Perceived threats to animal welfare are a trigger for public outrage, directly impacting on organisations or individuals who have positioned animals within their business model, including the sports playing field. The sport of endurance receives consistently bad reports in the media worldwide due to disregard for equine welfare. A social licence is much more than just legal or lawful activities. Its focus is on power relationships, and the very concept of the license goes some way to explaining how organisations can acquire or lose the legitimacy in the eyes of society. The social license gauges how organisations operate effectively or not in key spheres such as social equality, the environment, human rights, and increasingly these days, animal rights. The social license is about the interactions of many factors. It cannot be self-awarded or even directly managed by an organisation or even a government, nor can it be measured. There is no legitimacy index. Instead, there are factors that can be managed and contribute to an organisation's legitimation. For instance, trust and consent. It's a difficult question, especially when the social license is more apparent by its absence. In recent years, dressage has come under scrutiny for welfare considerations. The public increasingly question if the sport should even be happening in today's society, that is, its legitimacy. The public questions if it has enough public support, that's its license, for the sport's continued operation, that's the consent. And if sport is to continue, will it really meet the welfare requirements of the horse? That's the trust. There are many other examples of lost social licenses. The most recent occurred after a series of distressing images of horses struggling in modern pentathlon in the Tokyo 2021 Olympics. Riding has since been removed from the sport and replaced with cycling. The governing body agreed that riding should be replaced with a discipline that enhances the popularity and credibility of modern pentathlon. The highly controversial book published this year, called I Can't Watch Anymore, catalogues what happens to sport horses in plain sight and challenges the reader to confront the ugly reality of high-level equestrian competition today. The author co-founded the groundbreaking website Epona TV. The journalists at Epona broke some of the biggest scandals in the history of equestrian sport, documenting horse abuse, doping, and cheating in stories that went viral. This book sets out a compelling case for dropping equestrianism from the Olympic Games, accusing it of losing its social license to operate. We must improve, therefore, how the public perceives equestrianism if it's to survive at all, and that means every discipline must improve the images that the public sees. It's therefore important, if public opinion is to continue to allow horses to be used for our pleasure at all, that we strive to develop our understanding of what may compromise the horse's welfare. We must also be aware that ignorance of good practice is just as likely to create welfare concerns as deliberate malpractice. We can all do our bit in this respect, and I will discuss how we as horse owners can help to protect our social license by improving our horses' performances. The three elements of the horse, saddle, and rider interaction form a complex coupled system. Each individual element influences the others, but also moves independently through its own individual freedoms of movement. The effects on the horse of being ridden remain poorly understood, but improved knowledge of this is of critical importance to the welfare and performance issues in the ridden horse and the future of equestrianism. The effects of being ridden are undoubtedly of great importance to the way in which the horse moves, behaves, and performs, but remain poorly understood. Common causes of poor performance in horses include factors related to the horse, the rider, or the saddle, and it's rare to find someone who has sufficient expertise in all three areas to be able to accurately diagnose the primary problem. The saddle is an important coupling. It translates movement from the horse to the rider and vice versa. So poor saddle fit to either the horse or the rider, or both, will disturb that crucial communication. The function of the saddle is to provide the interface between the horse and the rider, and it should provide stability for the rider and reduce the peak forces exerted on the horse's back by the rider. But does it? Let's consider what the rider and the horse need from a saddle to facilitate optimal function. To control his posture and coordinate and synchronize his movements with the horse, the rider needs to balance on his seat bones with the femur hanging freely to facilitate hip rotation. This requires a narrow twist in the seat. The narrow twist in the seat is mirrored in a narrow waist in the panels. The horse, however, requires a wide gullet to avoid pressure on the spine and the sensitive support structures of the back. He needs room to bend and flex the thorax. The resulting saddle design is a compromise, but this often leads to a lack of support and protection in a narrow panel, which does not spread the load evenly and often leaves the bars of the rigid tree exposed, with a risk of injury to the horse's back. To understand how saddle design has evolved, we need to look back at military evolution. The earliest warrior horsemen from around 3000 BC simply vaulted onto the bare back of the horse. Blankets or animal skins provided better rider grip, then surcingles followed to hold the blanket in place. Toe loops were then added to the surcingle to aid mounting. The first dependable representation of a rider with paired stirrups was found in China about 300 AD. Stirrups added rider stability, but were the worst possible news for the horse. It changed everything. No longer just the rider's seat and legs gripping to stay on. Now there were peak pressure points and enormous force patterns caused by torque. Improved stability meant that the rider could stand up and use his hips, knees, and ankles as shock absorbers, which added greatly to the accuracy of weapon use. This in turn meant that the stirrups had to be held securely in place, so the earliest form of rigid framework or saddle tree was developed. This was essentially just two pieces of wood either side of the horse's spine, held together by arches at the front and rear. Thus, we can understand how trees were originally made for the purpose of holding the saddle securely in place. By 700 AD, armoured knights with shock weapons needed even greater security in the saddle. Holding a couch lance, dressed in heavy armour and moving at speed towards an opponent meant the introduction of a cantle to prevent the knight being pitched backwards off his horse. By the 17th century, the cavalry saddle was equipped with armour plating designed to protect the rider and hold them in place. However, there's an interesting reference to these metal reinforcements being responsible for major injury to the rider in the event of the horse falling. All weapon usage put a tremendous strain on the saddle. The vigorous movements of rider and horse revealed any weakness in the saddle construction. The strain and movement exerted by the saddle to the horse's back caused pressure gulls and open wounds. And it's said that during the Napoleonic Wars, the French army could be smelt by the stink from their horses' festering backs. Thus, we can see that the development of the form of the saddle was derived from its necessary function, which was first and foremost rider stability, not the comfort of the horse. So at this point, we can bust two popular myths. One, the saddle did not evolve to provide comfort for the horse. On the contrary, it's a damage limitation design. And two, good saddle design reduces peak pressures, but it can never evenly distribute weight or force between dynamic interaction of horses and riders. So, has saddle design progressed? Well, yes, but mainly no. If we compare saddle design through the ages, we can observe that they all have the same features. Rigid halves sitting either side of the horse's spine, held together by arches at the front and rear. The design hasn't altered because the function hasn't altered. Rigid parts of the tree in a conventional saddle tree create focal pressure points. A conventional saddle tree must be well padded to avoid injury to the horse's back from the tree. The base panels should provide even support. There are many manufacturing defects in today's saddles, including, as seen here, asymmetric base panels. If the saddle's too wide, as seen here, the tree points exert focal pressure. The stirrup bar may be recessed to provide greater comfort for the rider, but this can cause injury to the horse instead. Albert Einstein said, "Nothing happens until something moves." But in the case of horse saddle rider interaction, when things start moving, unexpected things can happen. The horse's back movement has 6 degrees of freedom, and this is translated as accelerations through the saddle to the rider. This movement is easy to understand if you visualize how a ship moves through the water, or in this illustration, how an airplane moves through the air. Let's consider how the horse's back moves the rigid saddle tree through 6 degrees of freedom. The movement of the horse's scapulae, back, ribs, and pelvis all create movement of the saddle through its 6 degrees of freedom. These comprise 3 linear movements and 3 rotational movements. The linear movements are vertical, up and down, horizontal, forwards and backwards, and lateral, left and right. The rotational movements center around one point. Each gait has different quantities of rotation. In trot, the saddle rotation is mainly roll. In canter, the rotation is mainly pitch, around the same center point. In walk, the rotation is mainly yaw, that is diagonal rotation. The weight of the rider adds force to the rotations, creating torque around the center point. Let's look at the rotational movement of the saddle on the static horse's back. We can observe the 6 degrees of freedom of the saddle movement. In trot, the rotation is mostly roll. In canter, the rotation is mostly pitch. And in walk, the rotation is mostly yaw. But what happens when the horse moves? The horse's back movement is translated through the saddle to the rider. The manner in which the horse carries the rider will affect the posture and balance of the rider. As the horse moves, the scapulae rotate backwards against the tree points. When turning, the inside scapula rotates further backwards. So now let's observe the movement of the tree on the horse's back during turning. The movement of the horse's scapulae, ribs, back, and pelvis all contribute to the movement of the saddle. Transient peak pressures are created by this movement, but in a well-fitting saddle, this movement is regular and predictable. When base panels are correctly fitted, they will attenuate some of this movement, but when the weight of the rider is added, the forces increase. Let's observe the movement of an ill-fitting saddle on the horse's back during turning. In an ill-fitting saddle, its movement on the horse's back becomes more irregular. This saddle is too narrow and the tree is too curved for this flat-backed horse, causing an irregular and unpredictable movement pattern that will create higher peak forces. Motion pattern stability is important because it allows coordination and synchronization between horse and rider. And this in turn leads to that holy grail of riding, harmonization. The saddle should remain central on the horse's back in all gaits and during turns and changes of direction. Slight movement from side to side is normal, but the saddle should not swing from side to side, slide forwards or backwards, bounce or lift off the horse's back at the rear. A rigid treat saddle twists across his back as the horse turns due to the rotation of the scapula. This in turn pushes the rider out. A rolling saddle provides an unstable platform for the rider, and riders of round-backed horses are usually more aware of a poor fit because they're more likely to roll. Wide horses are often overgirthed to help hold the saddle in place, and it's common to see three-point girth straps used in an attempt to provide stability. If the saddle moves excessively, riders often resort to over-tightening the girth. This over-tightening can cause myofascial tears and adhesions in the girth region. If a saddle's too narrow, the rear may lift off the horse's back because it cannot accommodate the movement of the horse's shoulders and back. If the saddle's too narrow, the scapulae will lift the tree points up as they rotate under it, causing the saddle to ride forwards up the neck. When the tree points interfere with the movement of the shoulder, the saddle may be pushed backwards. Excessive saddle movement may cause friction rubs. Damage to the hair follicles caused by pressure, heat, and/or friction may result in patches of hair loss or white hair. Muscle atrophy depressions caused by excessive pressure are frequently found behind the scapulae under the tree point area. Asymmetric patches of hair wear under the back of the saddle may be caused by rider or saddle asymmetry, but research has shown that these are more likely to be caused by saddle slip associated with hind limb lameness. Dry patches under the tree points and stirrup bars surrounded by areas of normal sweating may indicate excessive pressure. This image shows a normal pattern of sweat and dry areas. Movement of the fore and hind limbs creates more movement at the front and rear of the panels, but the central area remains relatively stable. So let's look at some innovations in saddle design. Traditional saddle makers have tried to overcome the problem of how to make a rigid frame that's designed to help the rider fit comfortably on a horse that needs to be able to move freely. This is an early example of creative thinking, which features rotating base panels that offer flexibility in fitting to different back profiles. Saddle designers have tried in different ways to make trees more flexible. But it's important to understand what the framework inside the saddle is comprised of, what it's specifically designed to do, and the effect that it will have on the horse. No saddle design has yet been scientifically proven to produce improved performance. Design seen here, which has since disappeared from the market, claimed to reduce peak pressures and featured an upper tree which could slide along a base tree with a shock absorber. In this design, shock-absorbing discs attach the flexible panels to the saddle tree. This saddle has a hinged headplate design. This is a rigid plastic tree that has a removable steel reinforced headplate, allowing alterations to the width of the front of the tree. Air-filled bags provide an alternative to traditional wool flocking to cushion the saddle base panels and are popular because they're easily adjustable. And this is the ultimate airbag design. Even a fully inflatable saddle exists. This British-designed inflatable saddle saves many pregnant women's lives in the remote mountains of Afghanistan by getting them to hospitals where there are no other methods of transport available. This is a cantilever design. And this is another example of a cantilever design, but this one failed because it could not withstand the tremendous forces that are present in the horse and rider interface. But how are new saddle designs tested? How do we know how they work, or indeed if they work at all? The simple answer is that we don't know the effects of different designs, but we can see from all of these design innovations that saddle designers have increasingly tried in different ways to make trees more flexible. Whilst treeless saddle makers started with floppy pads, like this bareback pad, and added some rigid parts to give more structure. But most so-called treeless saddles are actually part-treed and include a rigid structure, usually a pommel arch, to raise the saddle off the wither. This type of design usually leaves the girthing and stirrup systems unsupported. This will not avoid peak pressure points, but will actually increase them. It's therefore crucial to understand how an individual design will function on the horse's back to ensure the long-term comfort of the horse. This type of design cannot support correct rider posture and efficient rider biomechanics. It's not a rider's tool to enable them to synchronize more easily with the horse, and I use the term leisure pad, not saddle, to define them. Although starting at opposite ends of the spectrum, the two types of manufacture, that is, the traditional treed and the alternative treeless, are actually moving towards each other in trying to reach the same place. But there is a sweet spot in the middle of this design spectrum, and this is where the smart technology is located. The technologically advanced smart saddle has moved forwards in manufacturing techniques by incorporating substance to help spread the load over a wider weight-bearing area whilst remaining 100% flexible. The smart flexible saddle design functions a little bit like a Nike trainer on your foot. It's more stable because it flexes with the movement of the horse's back and therefore eliminates torque for both the horse and the rider. Bicycle saddles, although different in shape, do have some functional design requirements in common with a horse saddle, and that is that they're both required to provide leverage for rider stability. The front of the saddle is a balance point for the thigh. The thigh is then able to create directional influence. I love this action shot. Andrew Nicholson demonstrates perfect synchronization with Nereo. The horse is completing the airborne phase of the jump completely straight, but Andrew is already signaling with thigh leverage from his right leg that he wants to turn left. The weight pushing down into his left stirrup is adding to the force of the lever. This image demonstrates how the saddle increases the mechanical steering lever of the rider and therefore increases torque. This concept is really important to understand more fully because of the currently unknown effects that rider levers have on the forces exerted on the horse's back. Torque is a rotational force. Just as a linear force is a push or a pull to an object, a torque can be thought of as a twist. The magnitude of torque depends on three quantities: the force applied, the lever length, and the angle between the force and the lever arm. Jumping entails very active levers with undoubted torque exerted on the horse's back, but this has never been measured. The combination of the rider's weight, height, and posture will affect his use of active levers. A tall rider has longer levers, which will increase torque. The heavier rider's weight will increase the force of the lever, which will in turn increase torque. The rider is connected to the horse's back and uses leverage as part of the coping strategy to help them maintain stable phase synchronization with the horse's movement. The rider can use his active levers to influence the horse's balance and direction. These images show two combinations in half-pass. The rider on the left, in half-pass left, is moving in the same balance and direction as the horse, using his levers to influence the horse's direction. The rider on the right, in half-pass right, is moving in opposition, creating greater interface pressure by using his levers against the direction of the horse. This combination of poor posture, causing opposing levers, and a high rider to horse weight ratio will mean that huge torque forces are exerted onto the horse's back. These images show a round back on the left and a narrow or razor back on the right. In either type of conformation, there can be a torque point on the horse's back caused by the lateral branches of the tree, usually where the tree is at its narrowest, the waist. The soft tissue can become pinched between the tree and the top of the spinous processes. It's common to see muscle or ligament inflammation at this point. In chronic cases, this force causes atrophy of the musculature. Because it's extremely difficult to check the correct fit of the saddle in this area, this problem often goes unrecognized. It's not surprising that problems due to poor saddle fit are usually related to the willingness of the horse to be ridden. This video clip is a clear example of asynchrony of the movement of the horse, saddle, and rider. This is an advanced dressage combination. The rider's pelvis remains in alignment with the saddle as it moves, not the horse's back, with clear loss of synchrony. But the rider's compensatory movements and use of levers help to maintain their balance. This horse shows obvious gait asymmetry, which has caused asymmetric movement in the saddle. When the right hind is weight bearing, the horse's right hip is higher. The saddle moves to the right and the rider's pelvis moves to the right with the saddle. The asymmetry imposed on the rider increases the torque imposed on the horse's back, creating a vicious cycle. Here we can observe that the pitching rotation of the saddle and the asymmetry of the gait combine to create obvious torque patterns. This is the same advanced dressage combination with the young rider who already had severe chronic back problems. These images show 4 riders of differing sizes on the same horse. The saddle moved asymmetrically with all the riders, demonstrating that this was likely to be caused by horse or saddle factors, not the rider. In previous research studies, I've demonstrated that riders remain in alignment with the saddle, not the horse. So if the saddle moves to one side, the rider will also move to that side. During my PhD research, I also found that all test horses demonstrated asymmetric pelvic movement and displaced the saddle asymmetrically. Rigid saddles were more easily displaced laterally than a flexible saddle. The range of saddle displacement was greater than that of the rider, but the rider always remained more closely aligned with the saddle. And perhaps not surprisingly, advanced riders showed a more even pattern of movement. But, very surprisingly, riders, whatever their level, were completely unaware of asymmetry in the horse. So when is asymmetric gait actually a lameness? Let's consider how prevalent lameness is. In 2013, owners reported 20% of their horses to be lame in the National Equine Health Survey. But in the same year, a veterinary research study that compared horses before and after nerve blocking eradicated pain demonstrated that 58% of cases were lame. In 2016, research using inertial sensors recorded up to 67% of horses that were likely to be lame. In 2015, over 75% of cases that were evaluated ridden were lame. But in 2019, the shocking figure of 80% of horses in normal work and believed by their owners to be sound were found to be lame. So why is the percentage of lame horses rising? Well, I think we shouldn't get too depressed about these statistics, because undoubtedly we're finding new and better ways of evaluation, and that should be celebrated. We can't turn the clock back and reevaluate horses from the past to see if what we thought was sound then was actually lame. But I think it's a fair guess that that would probably be the case. We now know, for example, that many so-called training issues where the horse does not appear to be lame, such as a croup high canter, as we can see here in this image, or an asymmetry between left and right canters, can be due to pain-related problems such as sacroiliac disease. A horse that's working free from pain should find the work easy, not difficult. I don't believe that sound horses that are working comfortably want to resist or look for conflict and difficulties. The root of the problem in veterinary diagnosis is that the horse, unable to verbalize symptoms, will express pain in a complex and frequently misinterpreted manner. Within the equine industry, it's generally considered to be a normal training problem if the ridden horse displays signs of resistance or an unwillingness to work. When a ridden horse experiences discomfort, he may express this in many different ways. Abnormal behaviors, for example, are extremely common during tacking up and may be an indication of anticipation or discomfort when being ridden. Signs of resentment may include fidgeting, tail swishing, kicking, putting the ears back, head tossing, opening the mouth, biting. These are not normal behaviors, but owners often become accustomed to them and think that it's just normal for that horse. In the image on the left, the eyelids are closed, the ears are back behind a vertical position during noseband tightening. In the image on the right, the horse is tossing his head during saddle placement and the ears are back. Although extremely common, these are not normal behaviours. Although the trained horse should stand still to be mounted, he may move in anticipation of pain or discomfort when being mounted or ridden, and it's common to see horses that are reluctant to approach the mounting block or are difficult to mount. Signs of saddle-related problems in the ridden horse are often the same as may be exhibited by the horse for any other pain-related issue, such as sharp teeth or lameness. And this makes it very difficult to decide where the primary cause may be. In the first image on the left, we could observe a stiff stilted canter. The horse has a braced neck, it's above the bit, on the forehand and croup high. The rider's tipped forward, grips up with the lower leg and locks the hand against the contact. A simple diagnostic method is to change the saddle for one that fits the horse or the rider more comfortably. In this case, the saddle change allowed the rider to be in a balanced posture and enabled coordination and synchronization with the horse. In this way, the saddle can be ruled in or out as the primary cause of poor performance problems. So let's stop always blaming the rider for bad riding. But also remember that up to 80% of the time, it's more likely to be the horse. I always say that a horse moving well makes an unskilled rider look very competent, but the reverse is also true. A horse going badly can make even the most skilled rider look like a complete idiot. The rider cannot ride in balance if the saddle's not balanced. Saddle on the left is balanced with the seat horizontal. Saddle in the middle is too narrow, sits high at the front and tips the seat backwards. Saddle on the right is too wide, sits low at the front and tips the seat forward. The fit of the girth is important to both the lateral and longitudinal stability of the saddle. The effect of girthing is often to tighten the front and middle of the saddle, which, without the stabilizing effect of the rider's weight in the seat, can allow the saddle to lift at the rear. Additional pads and balancers are often used under the saddle in an attempt to improve saddle balance and function, but in some instances, additional pads may actually be detrimental by increasing focal pressure. The first effect that the rider has when he mounts the horse is to compress the saddle onto the horse's back with his weight. The heavier the rider, the more of the material within the panel will be compressed, and the more of the horse's back musculature will be compressed. The rider should carry out the simple knuckle test before and after mounting. It's good practice to do this every time you ride, as this test is very sensitive. Small changes in the horse's weight, or the rider's weight, or the natural compression of the filling material in the saddle panels can cause the saddle to drop close to or onto the spine. The second effect that a rider has is to cause the spine to extend. The heavier the rider, the greater the increase in spinal extension. The weight of the rider is also associated with a significant decrease in dorsal ventral and mediolateral range of the horse's spinal motion. Increased rider weight increases the risks associated with bad saddle fit. The result of a rider that's too big for the saddle is that the seat bones are not in the center and lowest point of the saddle seat, which leads to increased peak pressure on the horse's back. Because of the compromise to the rider's posture due to a saddle which is too small, the rider frequently adopts a chair seat with the lower leg positioned too far forward. This leads to high peak pressures exerted onto the horse's back at the rear of the saddle. Weight ratio is also an important factor in the influence of the rider on the horse. A large weight ratio percentage will allow the rider to be more influential on the horse's position and balance. In the image on the left, the tall rider could easily influence the direction of the small horse by using her active levers. The heavy, unbalanced rider on the right influences the horse's balance, causing staggering. There are many effects of overloading, including vertical imbalance and increased asymmetry, which is why we see a temporary appearance of lameness or an increase in existing lameness in horses carrying a high weight ratio. So what do we think is an acceptable rider to horse body weight ratio for the horse to carry? This is the traffic light system that I propose. 10% is green, Optimal performance means that the horse can work at or close to his physiological limits without significantly increasing the risk of injury. For example, completing badminton 3-day event or the Grand National, but sound and well. Amber is 15% and is a more normal scenario, but you should take many other factors into consideration, such as duration and intensity of the work, the age and fitness of the horse, and so on. 20% is a red light and could be a welfare issue if the horse was expected to do more than short periods of walking. Another effect of overloading is an increase in markers of pain behaviour. As we can see in this case, these include working above the bit, the ears rotated backwards, and an intense stare. A series of scientific research studies was specifically designed to identify and then accurately assess behaviours in the ridden horse that could be indicators of pain and lameness. This led to the development of the ridden horse pain ethogram. An ethogram is simply a catalogue of different kinds of behaviours observed in an animal, each with strict definitions. The ridden horse ethogram is simply a checklist of 24 behaviours which are 10 times more likely to be seen in a horse that's experiencing discomfort or pain. If a ridden horse displays 8 or more of these behaviours, it is highly likely to be lame. Many lamenesses are only apparent when the horse is ridden. The SRT has compiled an illustrated guide to the ridden horse pain ethogram, and this is free to download and share from the SRT website. Horse Tribe members can also access information on the ridden horse pain ethogram from the Horse Tribe website. The first example of pain behaviour is head movement. Repeated changes of head position, up and down, are not in rhythm with the trot. Remember that all the behaviours on this checklist are very, very common, but it's crucial to remember that they're not normal and should not be ignored. Another example is head tilting or tilting repeatedly. Remember, many lamenesses are only apparent when the horse is ridden. This checklist of 24 behaviours are 10 times more likely to be seen in a horse that's experiencing discomfort or pain. And if a ridden horse displays 8 or more of these behaviours, it's highly likely to be lame. Today, fewer people grow up with the horse as part of their daily family lives. This lack of natural horsemanship training has led to an increase in the number of horses that are managed by inexperienced owners. Many of the welfare problems that occur are due to horse owner mismanagement rather than intentional abuse. Ignorance of good practice is as likely to create welfare concerns as deliberate malpractice. It's therefore crucial to have regular professional reviews to check that your management practices are optimal. So, are you fit for purpose as a horse owner? Regular professional reviews are not just for elite competition horses. There are many professionals who your horse should see regularly, such as the physio, farrier, and the dental technician. The frequency of regular professional reviews will depend on the workload. So think of it a bit like a car service. The more miles you do, the more frequent the reviews should be. The rider too should have regular checkups from good coaches and physios who have a knowledge of rider biomechanics. And of course, time spent in the gym or fitness classes will only help good posture and balance. This is my essential checklist for the responsible horse owner. Horses generally change shape with the seasons, so seasonal checks every 3 months is good practice. Your saddle fitter should be suitably qualified and experienced in the type of saddle that you use. All my horses have regular 6-month vet reviews, whether I think they need it or not, and I believe that this should be standard practice for all horse owners. An experienced equine orthopedic specialist vet will pick up on subtle performance issues before they become problems. Consider this an essential investment in your horse's future. Simple checks now could save huge vet bills in the future. Of course, it's essential that your vet assesses the horse ridden, as many lamenesses are only apparent when the horse is ridden, and even then may only be noticeable in certain movements such as 10-meter circles. Most horses need some maintenance for existing issues. If they've been diagnosed with, for example, hock arthritis and the joint is medicated, it's likely that this will require continuing regular medication to keep the horse working comfortably. If I have a horse with a known condition, they have 3 monthly vet reviews. Horses that are in pain are more difficult to ride, and if we ensure that they are working comfortably, we may eradicate sights such as this, and therefore protect our social license to operate. It's hard to argue that the type of riding seen in this image is unintentional abuse. To justify our continued use of horses for sport, we need to think beyond the suffering that can occur as a result of injury and take a holistic look at the way we train and manage competition animals. So we all have an effect on the horse every time we ride, and it's up to all of us to minimize any negative impact and maximize the positive effects. Thank you for your attention and your interest in this topic.
Wonderful. Wow. There's so much information there. Really super interesting. Thank you, Anne. And we'll just touch on now where the audience can find out more information. And whilst we're doing that, I see there's one question coming in the Q&A. So start your grey cells thinking and do start typing in the Q&A section some questions for Anne. So Anne, yes, tell us a bit more about, if people want to find out more information, where can they find more?
Yeah, you can find me on equineperformanceconsultant.com. It's a very noddy website because I don't believe in spending my time creating flash websites. But I do equine performance consultancy, and if you'd like any advice on any aspects of equine performance, please contact me. My strapline is better for longer, optimizing sports horse performance, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, is looking at the horse holistically and trying to unpick where problems are arising and where a good route forward can be for the horse owner.
Brilliant. And also you touched on Saddle Research Trust and some resources as well.
Yeah.
Perhaps could you tell the guys a bit more about that, what they might find there that would be useful?
Yeah, saddleresearchtrust.com has some sort of lay interpretation, translation of scientific papers. It has various reports on research that's going on, also reports from the conferences that we run. You can look back on the video recordings of scientific presentations, which, don't be put off if you're not at all a science geek. They're very horse owner friendly. And I think we all get the same message of, let's look at welfare and performance and all the little bits that we can do in measuring things or observing things, and how we can then apply this to our own horses. So it's not meaningless research, it's absolutely translatable research that will have some effect and benefit to your own horses.
Yeah, wonderful. And you've got a special offer as well on, because you have a business as well, which is
yep. I design and manufacture a award-winning range of patented saddles, flexible saddles. We don't call them treeless because they have far more function than that. They are proper sports saddles for proper sports people. So if anybody would like to take advantage of the offer that's going on at the moment, especially for Horse Tribe members, then just contact us through the website or through the office.
Brilliant. And we'll get that online as well, so people can see that on our discount page. Wonderful. So yeah, the offer's valid until the end of September, so you've got a bit of time to appraise that and have a look further. So I see we've got some questions coming in, so let's have a look. What I'll do is I'll just stop sharing screen so that people can see your face a bit more, because I know it makes a bit of a difference. Then I'll go back to that once we've had a look at the questions. So let's have a look. We've got From Claire. Hi Claire, she's one of our regulars. So through concern about his saddle fit, I've had 7 qualified fitters all advise me differently about my 4 saddles. Fitters have much knowledge of saddles, but owners know their horses. So her question is, can saddle fit be learned by owners stroke riders in order to work with fitters?
Yes. Very, very simple answer, yes. And I run courses and education for also allied professionals, so vets, physiotherapists, other types of allied professional, and for horse owners. And I think it's really important that we arm ourselves with as much information as we can so that we can understand what professionals are discussing with us. And so that we can keep ongoing checks through, I mean, every time I get on a saddle, I'm checking the fit of it. I never even, you know, I'm horse hunting at the moment, so I'm trooping around the country trying other people's horses. And I get on and I'm fiddling about checking the fit when I'm on. It's just second nature to me. I cannot move off without knowing what that saddle's about to do when the horse moves off. And, you know, I mentioned the simple knuckle test. So many people don't do that on a daily basis. And you should be able to slide the knuckle under the pommel and to one side or to the other. And then when you stand in the stirrups and roll the saddle gently, you shouldn't ever have the feeling that you're crushing your knuckle. And ideally, you should be able to feel all the way down the gullet of the saddle to the back of the slope of the wither, so that you know that you're checking the danger points of impingement. And you know, these are things which are so easy to learn how to do. It's just practice. But yeah, I think most good, qualified, experienced saddle fitters are delighted to help people because they're all passionate about what they do. You know, they got into saddle fitting because they want to help horses. And so most of them these days are riders as well. You know,
Yeah.
Back in the day, you called the saddler, and a saddler was a saddler. There was no profession in my youth of the saddle fitter. It was just somebody who sold saddles and came out and plonked one on your back, and if you were comfortable, happy days. But
Yeah.
you know, the profession now is a, you know, well-respected career path. You know, it's something that now people can want to do from school, you know, and go and do an apprenticeship and go and learn. So most saddle fitters are absolutely delighted to spend time, and most of them want the client to be more interested and have more interaction because they want a good result. They want to go away from that yard seeing that horse going better, knowing that they've, you know, solved a problem or helped a horse and rider move forward more comfortably from then on. So yeah, pick everybody's brains, your vets, your physios, go in there and annoy them while they're working, because actually they all love it. They want to share their expertise. You know, no expert wants to keep it to themselves. That's
absolutely
not the way we are as humans, is it?
Yeah, and there's no better recommendation, is there, than when they've made a difference and you go around saying, oh my gosh, my horse is moving so much better now. You know, that's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions from Jane. I'll just kind of link in to the theme there. So about fitting. So she's asked, what's the most difficult horse to fit, fat and round or shark-like with a conformation, do you think?
Depends what type of saddle would be my first answer. I think that treed saddle fitters will struggle more with the round back, because if you think about it, a treed basically works a bit like a clothes peg. And so you can't put a clothes peg on something round. It will just roll, won't it? There's no point where it will fix itself in place. So I would say for conventional fitters, it's that round, fat, shouldered, native, cobby, you know, in July when they're all bloated. You just can't keep them in their paddock system or their strip grazing because they just break out everywhere. You know, everybody struggles with horses putting on weight too much in the summer. And so I think that, you know, that's when fitters, I think, really do have their problems, when horses put the weight on. But I would then say, with my other hat on as a saddle designer, that's why flexible saddles work, because you're not fixed to one size of clothes peg. You have basically a trainer that will flex a little bit and accommodate changes of weight.
Brilliant. You might notice I'm gently muting and having a little cough in the background. I have a little bit of a cold.
You've not been very well.
I try not to cough through the speakers, so bear with me as I gently have a mute and a little cough. So we have a question. Actually, I'll come on to Jane's two other ones because they're slightly different topic, but on the subject of fit, from Jana. Hi, Anne, do you have any pointers for checking bridle fit?
Yeah, ask yourself, when you put the bridle on, is that bit of leather necessary? I'm afraid I'm a bit of a minimalist, and I've got horses working without brow bands, without nose bands. The less clobber you have around their heads, the more comfortable they're going to be. Simple as. I would say that I'm not a huge fan of bitless bridles, because a lot of the designs are designed to put a lot of pressure on the nose, and people don't maybe notice sometimes how much pressure they're putting on, particularly the ones that cross over and you know, tighten up like scissors. However, bitless bridles, hackamores in the right hands, are very, very effective indeed, and I have used them, including in eventing, going cross country, and now they're banned cross country. Well, they were banned when I had a horse that just would not go cross country in a bit. I would have had a problem because it used to bolt with the bridle with a bit in its mouth towards cross country fences, which wasn't very great. But he went sweet as a nut in a hackamore. So I think you just have to look at your tack and imagine it was on your head. Which bits would give you a headache? And I know there was something, I used to hate wearing glasses before I had eye surgery, because I hated anything around the back of my ear. It would just give me a headache. So I'm always very careful about brow bands. And because brow bands, the traditional ones, have got the loop, that loop will always put pressure at that spot. So where it's rounded, in the middle of that rounded point, you will get a pressure point. I don't like the cheek pieces too high, so that the buckle is towards the orbital bone. So you need to be careful there. One of my pet hates is flash nosebands. I very, very rarely see a flash well fitted. And I don't really see how a flash strap can improve contact, because the very angle of it is going to pull the bit back and around on the lips. And very often I say to people, do you always use a flash? And they go, yeah. I go, well, you know, why? You know, what's he need it for? Oh, it's just on the bridle. And bridles nowadays are sold with flashes on. And so I think just question, because it's not rocket science. It's just common sense, really. It is just common sense.
Yeah, less is more, and it is really interesting how more and more manufacturers are starting to do more research and understand the pressure points. So long may that continue and rise, really.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, a lot of bridles that are designed to reduce pressure have put more leather into them to make them weird and wonderful shapes.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like testing saddle design and function. It's complicated because every horse is different, and the way you apply it and use it is different. And what works in a snapshot for one moment of testing might not work for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. So I think, you know, we need to be very careful. And if somebody says something is proven to work better, just say, well, you know, for how long? You know, how's it proven? Where's your evidence? And what type of evidence is it? Is it kind of lab testing or product testing, or has it been a robust long-term study that's shown that over time this works better? And do you know that over time stuff is expensive? It's really hard to do because over time things change anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Your horse grows. It's, you know, your young horse's head will keep growing, and if they get fat, they put weight on through their cheeks like we do as well. So, you know, things just don't stay the same, they change. It's really hard to come up with a good way of testing things, which is why we have very poor and a lack of testing.
And is that something that you champion through the Saddle Research Trust, to bring together organisations and manufacturers to try and look at how you can test and prove?
Yeah, we are very passionate about collaborations and bringing science to industry, but also my hobby horse is bringing industry and manufacturing into science, because a lot of the time scientists, researchers can go off down a rabbit hole that's incredibly interesting for them, and it's really super science and beautifully done, but it actually means diddly squat to me on my horse. Yeah. Because it doesn't make me change what I do. It doesn't give me any guidance as to what is best practice when I'm putting on a bridle or putting on a saddle. So I'm very passionate about practical field-based research. Might not be as robust as doing it in a laboratory, but actually it's a bit more meaningful to what we try to do with our horses. I'm just going to pop and put a light on because it's actually getting a bit gloomy in here. And
I know. I didn't get my. I've got a webinar ring light, which I normally have on, but because it started off such a beautiful sunny evening, I didn't have it on, so I'm a little bit shady tonight as well. Some would say I'm shady all the time. So just while you're getting your light on, we've got first of all, I'm not sure if it's Jana or Jana, but she said great discussion, thank you. So thanks for that feedback, Jana. So Jane had another question. So Anne speaks of using professionals to maintain her horses, and I thought that was a really good metaphor, actually, the car metaphor. And she says, but what about an owner/rider observation checklist? Would this be helpful too? So things for us to tick off when we're observing horses.
Oh, definitely. And you know, sometimes it's helpful to actually keep a written diary. I sometimes, if I'm working with a horse that I know has an issue, for example, I'll keep an Excel spreadsheet of a diary, and I'll write down the behaviors that I had on this day when it was ridden, the behaviors on the next day. If I'm doing a butte trial, for example, I'll do 2 weeks of pre-trial, 2 weeks of trial, and then 2 weeks of diary post-trial. And what I found with doing a butte trial is that the wheels fall off when you take them back off the butte. You might not notice a difference during your butte trial. And if you didn't keep those records, you might not notice where and when and how these changes occur. So I'm a great believer in keeping diaries. And checklists, well, if you use the ridden horse ethogram, to me, that is the checklist. So the 24 behaviors plus the tacking up and mounting behaviors, which actually isn't published in a sort of checklist format yet. We ought to do another illustrated guide, because that's, again, another very sensitive method of your horse communicating with you. And unfortunately, we don't always notice these things. So during the data collection for the tacking up study, I actually was one of the guinea pigs, as well as doing some of the data collection as part of the study, and one of the co-authors. I actually put myself in as a guinea pig, and I missed some of the behaviors. It's true that my horse had fewer than most, but I still missed, because you're busy putting a bridle on. You don't always necessarily see what's happening around the rest of the horse. Yes, you're much more aware when you're putting a saddle on if the horse swishes its tail or turns round and gives you a dirty look when you're tightening the girth. You get those, you know, you understand those, but the little subtle ones, my goodness, you can miss them. You really can. So it's a good thing to have those, you know, printed out somewhere on a board somewhere in the stables, and, you know, just think, oh, he closed his eyes when I was putting the bridle on, and he kept them closed. It wasn't just a blink while I was putting the bridle actually over his face. He wasn't just doing a sort of, you know, quick blink to make sure I didn't catch his eye. No, he had his eyes shut, and he looked a bit depressed in those 3 seconds that he kept his eyes shut. Just little things like that. People say, oh, it's a shame they can't talk. They do. They really.
Yeah, we have to learn to understand the language, don't we? I keep a note of how many times if my horse is yawning before I put a bridle on, and it's interesting. He'll yawn. I've started to notice a pattern, and I have a calendar. So you have an Excel spreadsheet. I love Excel spreadsheets, but I have a calendar by the back door where I go in and out to the yard, and every time I ride, I write, and I make notes as to, you know, did I have any lame steps? Did he yawn when I put the bridle on? Just to keep a note of certain things. So it's really, the pattern is important, isn't it? Of seeing the pattern.
And you can also give yourself notes when you're riding, because you can use voice memo on your smartphone and just, you know, 10 seconds of, oh, on that circle left, he just started grinding his teeth and tilting his pole to the left, and I've not felt that before. And so you can, you know, keep your own little audio diary.
That's great.
Excel. You don't need to do anything quite as anal as that. But
it's the scientist in you.
So and get people to video you. Get people to video you. That's the best checklist of all. Because it doesn't always look how it feels.
Yeah, and see them maybe a month apart, 3 months, 6 months. Yeah, it's great to see the difference, isn't it? Yeah.
And then apply the ethogram to yourself from the video. And if you play it frame by frame or ultra slow-mo, it's amazing what you'll see. So I'm a great believer in video, because that's how I do an awful lot of my own analysis and the biomechanical side. I just go frame by frame by frame, and it takes forever, but my goodness, the observations that you can make that you just don't see in real time, or even just slightly slowed down.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would really recommend playing around with video.
Yeah. Could we, so just I wanted to touch on before I forgot, the checklist, kind of the tacking up checklist. Is that something you said you're going to produce more of a checklist version?
I'll need to speak to lead author on that, Sue Dyson, because we worked on the illustrated version of the ridden horse pain ethogram, so that we could have this little checklist and people could have a visual guide to what that checklist really meant. Because I think sometimes you don't always think, oh, that applies to me. That, you know, you think, oh, well, that's somebody else's horse, it's nothing to do with me. Tossing its head, well, it doesn't really do that very much. But if you video yourself and actually see, just doesn't need to be huge big movements, but just a little bit of just not quite steady in the contact, you might not even notice it, or you might just think it's flies, or I don't know, maybe, you know, this is something he's always done and you just don't notice. But if you video yourself, then yeah, you'll see that.
Not to pick it up. Yeah, brilliant.
So I think that a visual guide to all the behaviors that came up as being, you know, consistently with the other pain markers. I think, you know, we probably need to do something about that, so it's a good layperson's guide to, you know, quick checklist. I'm a visual learner, and I think the majority of people are.
Yeah, definitely.
So you know, I like using you know, in the presentation, I've just done lots and lots of images. You won't see very many words or figures or numbers on my slides. It is just visual, and so yeah, I do think we need to do the illustrated guide to tacking up behaviours.
Fantastic. But just a couple of questions quickly, and then we're at the end. So again from Jane, does Anne think that in her lifetime there will be areas of equestrian sport that will be banned?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, for sure. Anything in particular? What do you think would be the first to?
Well, there are places in the world where things already are banned. If you look in Australia, steeplechasing, gone.
Wow.
They banned the whip, gone, in racing. Also in Australia, banned greyhound racing. So I think we need to be very, very careful. And you know, when the whole Mark Todd hoo-ha thing broke, I'm sure everybody watching will have heard. You need to be living under a stone not to have heard about the Mark Todd debacle. Basically, he was caught on somebody's mobile phone picking up a tree branch to try and get a horse into a water jump. Now, when you look at the video of that, the horse was going into the water perfectly okay. It was when going downhill and over a jump and a bit of more pace was introduced that it said no. So it wasn't about the water. So to me, you know, I would question, was there something about that horse's front feet that it didn't like landing with drop fence? Because it wasn't about, anyway, that's by the by. I've forgotten what I was going to say there. Do you know,
it was about sport being banned, and it will probably come, won't it?
So yeah, we just, the whole thing, the sort of commentary in social media was, well, make sure that you don't get filmed. Don't let people bring mobile phones or video cameras. But to me, that's entirely upside down. That's reactive. That's not proactive. We need to do things in clinics that can be filmed, that look lovely, that when they go on social media, it's happy, smiley people, happy, smiley horses. And to me, the way to do that is to take pain away from horses, because they start being angels when they're not in pain. I promise you. I've worked with enough horses that have been diagnosed with problems. I've ridden them after nerve blocks where the pain's been eradicated, and they're just different horses. And until you felt that time after time after time, I don't think you really get it. You know, I can talk about pain behavior. You can, you know, try and get the message out, but people think it doesn't apply to them. And I think until you really actually feel it for yourself, you know, the first time I really got it, I was just in floods of tears, because I knew that when the nerve blocking wore off, my horse would be gone again.
Yeah.
And it's when that really, really hits you that you start to get it. And so now, you know, I think we have a moral obligation to help horses if we're going to ride them and compete them. You know, there are people who said to me, oh, if it needs joint medications, it shouldn't be competing. Well, okay, what else are you going to do with them? Shoot him? Or sell him to somebody who knows less than you and is perhaps not going to look after it as well as you? And then it will go to an auction house because it gets nasty and starts throwing people off and throwing its weight around. You know, you're just going to let it go down the feed chain. So what do you do? And to me, we breed them, we train them, they cost us money. Okay, let's try and keep them going just from an economical point of view. But, you know, you're emotionally invested in your horse as well. You don't want it to be off the road after 2 years because it can't cope with the work. Let's help them. Why not? You know, it's not doing them any harm to medicate their joints if they need it. It's doing them good, it's helping them. And people say, oh, well, I'll just retire him to the field, you know, if they don't want to shoot him. But how do you know he can sleep at night? You know, is he comfortable in his own body to be retired to the field? Yeah. I don't like the idea of horses, you know, not being comfortable all the time and just not doing anything to help them. So controversial, there you go, that's me.
Yeah. So let's do the best we can. Let's do the best we can.
Yeah, to me it's a moral obligation. Yeah.
Very last, very quickly, from Jane, have synthetic materials made a difference to horses' comfort, sweating, etc.?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you can beat, actually, you know, if it's hot and sweaty, I think you can't beat actually putting wool on them. Because
a natural,
if you think about it, the only technical materials that we use as human athletes have got lots and lots of holes in them and are really thin and really stretchy. Well, you can't do that with saddles and bridles. So there's nothing wrong with the materials that we currently use. I think there's a growing interest in using synthetics because of the environmental impact, because some of the chemicals used in producing leather aren't very nice, and because of the whole way that we produce animals, particularly cattle, is not that great. So leather is a byproduct of that. So there's a sort of growing demand for vegan leather, if you like. But I'm not sure that it's actually any more environmentally friendly. I don't know the science between all the different fabrics to tell you that, but we have, as a company, looked into using different materials, and if they were better, everybody would be doing it. There's the growing niche at the moment of people trying to do it, but there is not that much out there yet that's successful and synthetic.
Super, thank you so much. It's been incredibly interesting, a great discussion, lots that we've covered, and there's lots more material for you all to read up on and check out. So as Anne said, you can contact her. There's the Saddler Research Trust. We have a number of webinars by Dr. Sue Dyson as well that you can go back and look at, especially if you're a gold member. You can go back and watch those for free, or you can pay and watch them on demand if you're one of our free members. And we have an article on the ridden horse ethogram, and we have the checklist, and we have a dressage test that Sue's written that you can use to check your horse against as well when you're checking out for those behaviours. So there's loads of material for you to go and read up on and watch. So very funny, very, very quickly, and then I'll let everybody go. I just want to let you know of the webinars that are coming up. So on the 28th of April, we have the lovely ex-pro groom Liz Daniels coming back for another webinar. She's talking about top tips for perfect platting, and she's just been to the Nationals with her horse doing dressage, so she knows what she's doing to make them look smart. We then have Dr. Catherine Nankovich. She's based at Hartpury and runs the equine division there, and she is covering busting the myths of horse fitness, so really helping us understand how to keep our horses fit, get them fit. And then really exciting, this is Ray Erasmus will be dialing in from South Africa. He is a horse safari guide, and he's a behaviourist as well. He's done an awful lot of research about how to train horses in a very respectful and considerate and collaborative way to deal with, of course, on safaris, to deal with predators being in the environment and working together in partnership. So he talks about his tips, how he trains his horses, and how you can use those techniques to solve any problem with your horse. So that's going to be really interesting, live from South Africa. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Thank you so much again to you, Anne, for spending the time with us tonight and sharing all of your knowledge and understanding. And we hope to see you again very soon. So thank you, everybody. have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, Anne. Bye-bye.
Bye.